unforgivable not to seize the opportunity to bring an end to the suffering in Syria. For months, the US and Russia have been pressing for a follow-up to the Geneva conference last year, which called for a transitional government in Syria. Well, the man who will be mediating these peace talks is Lakhdar al Ibrahimi, and I'm joined now by journalist Nabila Ramdani, who can tell us more about his work as a negotiator. I think you know him quite well personally.
Yes, indeed. I've met him on several occasions at international conferences, at press conferences, but also in an informal context, absolutely.
And is he the man to deliver a sort of complex negotiation like this, because it is so difficult?
I think he's a very wise elder statesman. He clearly is very experienced in terms of leading very impressive and indeed difficult UN missions in the past, not least of all in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, when he played a great role in putting together an interim government, for example, after US forces invaded those countries. He also played a crucial role in 1989 when he put together the Taif Accords, which led to effectively put an end to the Lebanese civil war and led to Syrian troops pulling out of Lebanon. His political formation started very early on as a Algerian nationalist, playing a role in the course of the struggle of independence for his own country, Algeria, against France. He was 22 when he was studying law and politics in France, and he was already playing a role as a peacemaker, effectively. He was trying to pacify the different rival factions of Algerians in mainland France and collect money to fund the National Liberation Front. So his political formation started at a very early age, when he was 22.
So tough and yet a pragmatist as well?
He's very much of a pragmatist and a realist. When he took up this impossible job in August 2012, after Ban Ki-moon effectively failed to bring about a ceasefire in Syria, he admitted that he had an impossible mission on his hands, and the situation was bad and it was getting worse. So I think his strength, however, was that he had great credibility with both world leaders and rival factions in Syria. But his greatest fears were always that his fear was that the country would get completely destroyed and that he will have to deal with rival factions within Syria itself. So he was very realist about the immense challenge that was facing him.
But what you describe is pretty much what has happened. I mean, you know, Syria has been torn apart. It has been destroyed as a country to a very large extent. And that's what he's going to have to sign peace together in Geneva in January.
Well, absolutely, and there has always been some doubt about the role that the United Nations can actually play in sorting out the Syrian conflict effectively, with the major stumbling block sitting at the UN Security Council being great allies of Syria, including China, but more crucially a country like Russia, who has proved to be a very loyal ally to Syria. And even with the Geneva II talks coming up, there's already some skepticism as to what can come out of Syria with, rival groups rehearsing the same arguments and the same conditions.
Because it doesn't sound as if anyone's moved particularly in terms of their position. You know, Bashar al-Assad says, I'm still in charge of the country, now let's see what happens. Yet others are saying, for a precondition of their being there, he has to show a willingness that he's going to stand down.
Indeed, the Syrian government, in principle, agreed to attend those talks, which is something of an achievement, but they're already saying that Assad's departure is not an option, while the opposition is, putting that as a prerequisite to the talks. So already we have, two determined and intransigent blocs facing each other.
Yeah, well, two intransigent blocs. I mean, does the opposition speak with one voice?
Well, that's the other issue in this hugely complicated matter, is that the opposition is indeed fragmented. You have political opposition, with the main political party accepting to take part in the talks. Other parties are not interested in participating at all, whereas you have also armed branches, notably the Free Syrian Army, whose made it abundantly clear that it will pursue the armed insurgency against the Syrian regime.
Yeah, and also interesting, in light of all that we've just been discussing about what was agreed in Geneva over the weekend in relation to Iran and its nuclear programme, what role Iran itself will play, because it is also a huge power broker in Syria.
Well, absolutely, and as we know, there are Iranian elements fighting on the ground in Syria to stand by the Syrian regime. I think it would be a major flaw not to bring in Iran. Clearly, engaging with a country, and world powers are now very much in the process of resuming communications with a pariah country, effectively. But what is also clear is that Russia has effectively managed to remove any military intervention against Syria. So the only solution, it appears, will have to be political and not military.
OK, Nabila Ramdani, really good to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed. Just to say a little later on, we hope to be speaking to Monza Akbik, a spokesperson for the National Coalition for Syrian Revolutionary and Opposition Forces. All that still to come. Do stay with us here.